Professor Zix Van swept into the lecture hall of the Galactic Academy of Xenobiology, with all 6 of their sensory appendages twitching in excitement. The professor's chromatophores were flashing an excited purple-green, a clear sign to their students that today's lesson would be either absolutely fascinating or completely terrifying. Given their course subject, deadly worlds and their native species, it was probably both. "Today, class," the professor announced, their voice modulator barely containing their enthusiasm, "we begin our unit on Classification 13 planets, commonly known as Death Worlds." A holographic projection materialized above the central podium, showing a small, unremarkable blue-green planet. "And we're not just studying it from here, we're going on a field trip." The classroom erupted in a cacophony of excited clicks, whistles, and electromagnetic pulses, the typical sound of 30 different species of advanced beings, all trying to talk at once. A Glorbon student in the front row actually molted from excitement, which would have been embarrassing if anyone had been paying attention. Settle down, Zix Van's chromatophores pulsed in soothing patterns. "Yes, we're visiting Earth, specifically the continent their inhabitants call Australia. The university board took only 6 months to approve the required insurance policies, which I believe is a new record." From the back of the room, Kethrix, a crystalline being from the methane seas of Rigel 7, raised a faceted appendage. "Professor, my preliminary research indicates that the dominant species, humans, are Class 2 endurance predators with no natural weapons beyond their tool use. Surely their world can't be that dangerous?" The professor's chromatophores shifted to an amused orange. "Ah, the confidence of youth. Tell me, Kethrix, are you familiar with the concept of convergent evolution, resulting in multiple apex predators within discrete environmental niches?" No. "Well, you're about to be." Zix Van projected another image, this time of various Australian wildlife. Earth species evolved in isolation for millions of years, creating what the humans call a evolutionary arms race. Everything is trying to kill everything else, and they've gotten remarkably good at it. Clorax, a hulking Novarian whose species was renowned across the galaxy for their warrior culture, let out a dismissive rumble. "My carapace can withstand plasma bolts, Professor. What could possibly penetrate it?" "Funny you should ask." The professor's colour shifted to what their students recognized as their "you're about to learn a painful lesson" shade of chartreuse. "We'll be paying special attention to their arachnids, particularly one species that's smaller than your optical receptor." The tiny ones, Clorax's secondary breathing holes, wheezed in what passed for Novarian laughter. "Professor, with all due respect, I think your threat assessment protocols need recalibration." Zix Van's response was to project one final image, a medical report from the last xenobiology expedition to Australia. The laughter in the room died faster than a Mercurian snow crystal in a plasma forge. "Pack your environmental suits, students, and remember, the permission slips must be signed in triplicate, notarized by a Class 3 precognitive being, and filed with both the Academy Board and your species' respective medical authorities." The professor's chromatophores flickered with barely suppressed glee. "Oh, and do make sure your life insurance is up to date. We leave in 3 standard cycles." As the students filed out, already buzzing with excited speculation, Professor Zix Van added one final note to their lesson plan. "Note to self, remember to pack extra anti-venin. The last thing we need is another incident like the Great Platypus debacle of 2347. The Australian Xenobiological Research Centre rose from the red earth like a chrome mushroom, its climate-controlled domes gleaming under the merciless sun. As the class's transport vessel touched down, Professor Zix Van noticed several students activating additional shield layers on their environmental suits. The professor's chromatophores flickered with amusement. They hadn't even reached the dangerous part yet. "Welcome to AXRC!" Dr. Chen's voice boomed across the landing pad as the human strode toward them, wearing nothing but light clothing and a wide-brimmed hat. Several students recoiled in horror at his apparent disregard for safety protocols. "Don't worry about the environment, folks. We keep all the interesting specimens inside, though watch where you step. The local bull ants can get a bit frisky. Chlorax, the Nevarian warrior student, deliberately placed his armoured foot near a bull ant nest. These primitive earth insects pose no threat to... His boast cut off in a screech as 3 ants immediately began chewing through his suit's outer layer. Dr. Chen casually flicked them away with a stick. "As I was saying," the human continued, fighting to keep a straight face, "let's head inside for the tour. We've got quite the collection to show you." The research centre's main exhibition hall was a marvel of containment technology, with specimens from all over Australia housed in perfectly calibrated environments. Dr. Chen led them past displays of brown snakes, box jellyfish, and blue-ringed octopi, delivering a running commentary that made several students' external membranes go pale. "Now, this beauty," he said, pausing at a large terrarium, "is a saltwater crocodile. We had to remove her from a tourist beach last month. She was snacking on boat motors." A Zentorian student, whose civilization had evolved from apex aquatic predators, pressed all 4 hands against the glass. "But it's so... primitive. Where are its quantum-sensing organs, its bioelectric field generators?" "Doesn't need them," Dr. Chen replied cheerfully. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Speaking of which, who's ready to see our arachnid collection?" The spider section occupied its own reinforced wing of the facility. Display cases lined the walls, each containing what appeared to be increasingly tiny specimens. Dr. Chen saved the smallest for last, a dark-coloured spider that could have fit comfortably on a human thumbnail. "This, my extrasolar friends, is the Sydney funnel web spider. Specifically, this is a male, and he's not happy about it. Males tend to be more aggressive and more venomous than females. They also love to go for swims in backyard pools, because why not add aquatic capabilities to a creature that's already running a 100% on the nightmare fuel meter?" A Medusan student, whose species had evolved natural force fields, waved a tentacle dismissively. "But surely such a small creature's venom would be negligible. Our warriors regularly survive exposure to quantum phase toxins." Dr. Chen's smile took on a predatory edge that would have made a great white shark proud. "Funny you should say that. The funnel web's venom contains a compound called delta-atrichotoxin. It basically tells your nerve cells to never stop firing, causing massive organ failure. We've seen it chew through environmental suits that were rated to withstand acid baths." Chlorax, still nursing his wounded pride from the bull ant incident, stepped forward. His massive form cast a shadow over the display case. "Then perhaps a demonstration is in order. My species takes pride in our resistance to all known toxins. Let us see how your tiny terror fares against Nevarian biology." The room went quiet. Dr. Chen's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in his eyes. "Well, if you're volunteering..." He glanced at Professor Zix Van, whose chromatophores were cycling through warning colours faster than a rave light show. "I believe," the professor said carefully, "that would require additional waivers." "Oh, we have waivers," Dr. Chen replied, reaching for a drawer that seemed to contain nothing but stacks of paper. "We have so many waivers. Would you like them in alphabetical order, or by potential cause of death?" The other students began recording devices, their various sensory organs fixed on the unfolding scene, with the kind of fascination usually reserved for watching stars go supernova. This was either going to be the most impressive demonstration of Nevarian superiority in academic history, or, well, there was a reason the medical bay was right next door to the spider exhibition. Dr. Chen pulled out a specific form, his smile now reaching levels of cheerfulness that should have been illegal in a scientific facility. "Now, who's ready to learn about the proper way to handle one of Earth's deadliest arachnids? I promise this will be a lesson you'll never forget. Assuming you survive it, of course." The containment lab hummed with the sound of environmental seals engaging as Dr. Chen methodically prepared for the demonstration. The room's walls were lined with emergency shower stations, medical equipment, and what appeared to be enough antivenin to treat a small army. The other students pressed against the observation window, their various recording appendages whirring and clicking. "Last chance to back out," Dr. Chen announced, checking the seals on his protective suit for the third time. "The paperwork for a demonstration is actually shorter than the paperwork for a fatality. Just saying." Clorax stood in the center of the room, his massive frame encased in what the Novarian military assured everyone was their most advanced protective suit. The armor gleamed under the harsh lab lights, covered in runes that were supposed to ward off toxins. "Your concern is noted, human, but unnecessary. Perhaps after this, your facility can update its threat assessment protocols regarding Earth creatures." Professor Zixvan's chromatophores had settled into a resigned shade of grey. "For the record, the Academy's insurance adjuster is going to have an aneurysm when they see this footage." Dr. Chen approached the specialized container housing the funnel-web spider, his movements deliberately slow and precise. "Now, everyone, pay attention to the containment protocols. These spiders can survive underwater for 24 hours, so we keep them in double-sealed habitats. They've been known to chew through certain types of plastics, and the males, like our friend here, are particularly aggressive." Through the observation window, a Quantum Hive student transmitted, "But it's so small, my optical processors can barely detect it." "Size isn't everything," Dr. Chen replied as he carefully transferred the spider into a larger demonstration chamber. "This little guy's venom evolved specifically to target nerve cells. It's so effective that we still don't fully understand all its components. Even other spiders die when this one bites them." Clorax flexed his armored arms, causing the runes to pulse with defensive energy. "My species survived the quantum wars. We developed resistance to every known toxic compound in the galaxy. Your tiny arachnid will barely register on our threat scale." "Fascinating," Dr. Chen mused, securing the demonstration chamber. "Tell me, did any of those compounds specifically target delta-atrikotoxin-sensitive ion channels? Because this little fellow's venom has a particular fondness for those." Before Clorax could respond, the spider suddenly darted across its enclosure with shocking speed, causing several students to emit alarm pheromones. Even through the thick observation glass, they could see its aggressive posture. "Ah, yes," Dr. Chen commented casually, as if discussing the weather. "I should mention they're also surprisingly fast, and they have a rather nasty habit of delivering multiple bites in rapid succession. The fangs can penetrate a leather boot, by the way. We learned that the hard way back in 43. The demonstration chamber was now fully prepared. It consisted of a clear, reinforced space about 2 meters square, with the spider currently residing in a smaller container that could be remotely opened. Clorax stood at one end, his armor systems humming with protective energy. "Now then," Dr. Chen said, double-checking the safety seals. "The demonstration protocol is simple. We'll release the spider and observe its behavior. At the first sign of suit penetration, we abort. The emergency medical team is standing by, and we have enough antivenin to treat a blue whale. Though I should mention we've never actually tested it on Novarian physiology before." Professor Zixvan's voice crackled over the intercom. "Clorax, as your academic supervisor, I feel compelled to remind you that spectacular failure is also a valid scientific outcome." The other students had their recording devices running at maximum capacity. A Quantum Hive member was already calculating the odds of survival, their crystalline structure flickering with complex equations. A Medusan student had extended all their sensory tendrils, unwilling to miss a single moment of what was about to unfold. Dr. Chen's hand hovered over the release mechanism. "Any last words? Preferably something more original than what could possibly go wrong, because that's statistically the phrase most commonly found in posthumous research notes." Clorax took up a defensive stance, his armor's energy field creating a visible shimmer in the air. "Release your champion, human. Let us settle once and for all whether your world's tiny terrors can truly threaten a Novarian warrior." "Your funeral," Dr. Chen muttered under his breath, then louder, "beginning demonstration in 3, 2, 1. The release mechanism clicked, and the tiny spider emerged into the demonstration chamber. For a moment, everything was still. The spider remained motionless, its small form almost comically insignificant against Clorax's armored bulk. Then it moved. The speed with which the funnel-web spider launched itself at Clorax's suit made several students question whether Earth had secretly mastered teleportation technology. The tiny arachnid seemed to disappear and reappear at different points on the armor, testing it for weaknesses with an almost methodical determination. "Fascinating," Dr. Chen commented, taking notes. "It appears to be specifically targeting the joint seams. They really are remarkably intelligent when it comes to finding ways to bite things." Clorax maintained his defensive posture, but anyone watching closely could see a slight tremor in his armored limbs. Is it supposed to move like that?" "Oh no," Dr. Chen replied cheerfully. "This one's actually being quite calm. You should see them when they're angry." What happened next would later be described in the Academy's report as a cascading series of unfortunate events. Though Professor Zix Van's personal notes used considerably more colourful language, the spider, apparently tired of testing Clorax's armour, found what it was looking for: a microscopic gap in the suit's joint ceiling, right where the quantum-reinforced plating met the energy field projectors. The gap wasn't visible to any of the recording devices. It wasn't even visible to Clorax's own suit diagnostics. But somehow, the tiny arachnid spotted it. "Remarkable targeting behavior," Dr. Chen commented, still taking notes even as he reached for the emergency protocols panel. "They usually take much longer to find a weakness. This one must be especially motivated." The spider's fangs, each barely larger than a grain of sand, pierced through the gap. The suit's internal sensors didn't even register the breach. They were calibrated for much larger threats. Clorax's first indication that something was wrong came when his left leg suddenly decided to try leaving the solar system without the rest of him. "Interesting," Dr. Chen observed as Clorax's armor began sparking. "The venom appears to be interfering with your suit's neural interface. That's new. Usually it just dissolves the circuitry." "What do you mean usually?" Clorax's voice had risen several octaves, which no one had previously thought possible for a Novarian. His armor was now generating patterns of energy that looked less like defensive shields and more like a malfunctioning disco ball. The spider, apparently delighted by the light show, delivered 3 more bites in rapid succession. Each strike hit with surgical precision, targeting gaps that shouldn't have existed. Clorax's armor systems began flashing warnings in 17 different languages, including 3 that had been extinct for millennia. "Emergency protocols engaged," Dr. Chen announced, though it was hard to hear him over the sound of Clorax's suit, attempting to translate his panic into interpretive dance. The human slammed his hand down on a large red button, flooding the chamber with a fine mist designed to incapacitate arachnids. The spider ignored it completely. "That's also new," Dr. Chen muttered, already moving to the backup containment protocols. "They're not supposed to be able to do that." Professor Zix Van's chromatophores had achieved a shade of panic previously unknown to chromatic science. "Medical team, stand by for immediate intervention. Someone contact the Novarian embassy, and someone else check if we have enough insurance to cover an interstellar diplomatic incident." The spider, having apparently decided that Clorax's armor made an excellent jungle gym, continued its systematic exploration of every microscopic weakness in the suit's defenses. Each bite introduced more venom into the system, causing cascading failures in both the armor's technology and Clorax's natural defenses. "Don't worry," Dr. Chen shouted as he activated the facility's maximum containment protocols. "The fatality rate is only about 50% when treatment is immediate, and you're much bigger than our usual patients, so, well, the math probably works out somehow." The medical team burst through the containment doors wearing suits that made Clorax's armor look like casual beachwear. They were carrying enough emergency equipment to stock a small hospital and what appeared to be enough antivenin to treat several extinction-level events. "Patient secured," the lead medic announced, somehow managing to wrangle both the flailing Novarian and their malfunctioning armor. "Beginning emergency treatment. Someone grab that spider before it decides to go for round 2. Dr. Chen, demonstrating either remarkable bravery or a complete lack of self-preservation instinct, managed to recapture the spider using a specialized containment device. The arachnid seemed almost smug as it was returned to its enclosure, if such an emotion was possible for a creature with simple eyes and a brain smaller than a pinhead. As the medical team rushed Clorax to the emergency treatment center, Professor Zix Van turned to address the remaining students. Well, their chromatophores stabilizing into a shade of professional detachment. I believe this concludes today's practical demonstration on why Earth is classified as a death world. Would anyone like to venture an initial hypothesis about the interaction between funnel web venom and Novarian biotech? Through the observation window, they could hear Clorax making sounds that would probably require the invention of new mathematical principles to properly describe. The medical team was shouting about unprecedented venom dispersal patterns and the need for additional antivenin synthesis. Oh, and class, Dr. Chen added, carefully securing the spider's habitat. This was one of our smaller specimens. 3 standard weeks after the infamous spider incident, Professor Zix Van stood before the Academy board reading the final incident report. Their chromatophores had finally stopped displaying random warning colors every time someone mentioned arachnids. Patient Clorax has made a full recovery, they announced to the assembled board members, though his armor may never be the same. The Novarian Engineering Corps has requested all available data on the venom's effects on quantum-reinforced materials. Apparently they're considering it for future weapons development. The board chamber erupted in concerned murmuring. A weapons system based on Earth wildlife was either brilliant or terrifying, possibly both. The head administrator raised 3 of their sensory stalks for silence. And the educational outcomes, they inquired. Professor Zix Van projected the class findings. Remarkable, actually. The students' final reports showed unprecedented engagement with the material. Several have already proposed doctoral theses on Earth's evolutionary arms race. One quantum hive student is attempting to model the mathematical principles behind how a creature with such a simple nervous system can target weak points in advanced armor. Dr. Chen, attending via hologram because he was busy with a new spider research project, chimed in. The incident has also led to some fascinating discoveries about our funnel web friend. Turns out it wasn't actually trying to kill Clorax. It was attempting to establish dominance. These spiders are apparently even more intelligent than we thought, which is concerning. The board members shuffled nervously in their seats. The idea that Earth's creatures might be intentionally toying with advanced civilizations was not a comfortable one. We've updated the curriculum accordingly, Professor Zix Van continued. Death World Studies now includes a mandatory section on micro-predators. The new course description includes the phrase, "size matters not," which I believe is a quote from some Earth philosophical text. The medical department representative raised an appendage. What about the psychological impact on the students? Well, Professor Zix Van's chromatophores flickered with amusement. Clorax has developed an impressive ability to detect spiders at ranges previously thought impossible. He can now identify arachnid movement patterns from orbit. The Novarian military is calling it a combat enhancement. The other students had their own reactions. The Quantum Hive Collective had reprogrammed all their threat assessment protocols. The Medusan student had added 3 additional layers to their natural force fields. Even the crystalline beings had started vibrating at frequencies designed to repel small arthropods. But perhaps most significantly, Dr. Chen added, we've noticed a marked decrease in dismissive attitudes toward Earth species. Nobody's called anything primitive for weeks. Though I should mention that the spider responsible for this educational breakthrough recently molted. The board chamber went quiet. Professor Zix Van's chromatophores paled. Molted? Oh, yes. Dr. Chen's hologram smiled in a way that made several board members check their chairs for spiders. Turns out that one was just an adolescent. They get about 20% bigger as adults. And more aggressive, if you can believe it. Would anyone like to volunteer for a follow-up demonstration? The sound of 24 advanced beings trying to politely decline at once created harmonics that shattered 3 windows and a quantum computer. No. Well, if anyone changes their mind, we just discovered that they can survive in zero gravity. Apparently one hitched a ride on a space shuttle back in the 2030s, started building webs in the carbon dioxide scrubbers. The cleanup crew needed therapy afterward. Professor Zix Van quickly wrapped up the presentation before Dr. Chen could share any more delightful facts. The new curriculum was approved in record time, along with an increased budget for environmental suits and anxiety medication. As the board members filed out, many of them carefully checking their robes for tiny stowaways, Professor Zix Van received one final message from Clorax. The former warrior student had apparently decided to change his focus to Earth studies, with a particular emphasis on respect from a distance protocols. His thesis proposal was titled, "Why the Small Ones Are Always the Worst, a comprehensive study of Earth's micro-predators and why we should stop giving them ideas." Dr. Chen's final comment, delivered just as the hologram was fading out, seemed to sum up Earth's position in the galactic community perfectly. Just wait until they hear about our platypus breeding program. Did you know they're technically venomous too? And they glow under ultraviolet light. Would anyone like to volunteer for... The rest of his words were lost as Professor Zix Van hastily terminated the transmission. Some lessons, they decided, could wait for next semester, though they did make a note to update the insurance policies. Again. From its enclosure back on Earth, the newly molted funnel web spider began planning its next educational demonstration. After all, there were so many more lessons to teach about why Earth had earned its Death World classification. And this time, it had learned how to climb glass.